Our next conversation is about inclusive governance, and we've been asking that question: is it a missed opportunity already, or it is something that we still have hope of addressing? Now, don't forget that promoting inclusivity and diversity, appointing persons with disabilities to leadership roles in government agencies, is intended to raise awareness, create public discourse, and urge the President of Nigeria to act in appointing qualified persons with disability to leadership roles in government agencies. So, question then is, what challenges might individuals with disabilities face when seeking leadership positions, and how can these obstacles be overcome? We should have two gentlemen join us this morning. Paul James is Program Manager, Election, YIAGA Africa, as well as Mr. Isiaku Adamu, who is National Secretary, Joint National Association of Persons with Disabilities, and both of them join us. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. In our Abuja studio, let me ask you, let's begin this conversation from where you sit. What do you think it's a missed opportunity?
No, it can never be a mixed opportunity. Rather, I think a perfect opportunity for the government to do some of the things that they promised during their campaign, because this is a government whose campaign was anchored on ensuring inclusivity or participation of different strata of the society. Now that the opportunity is there, as far as we can see, as far as appointments are concerned, I think it is the time that the government begin to do what is right by not only the disability community, but also by every strata of the society. We have seen some high-level appointment happen already, especially that of the ministers. And so it begs the question, is this truly what we have aspired to see from the word go? Because you got over 48 persons that were nominated for the position of the minister. So far, about 45 confirmations have been made. We still have 3 more to go. Whether the president intends to complete those 3, we don't know yet. But we thought, so far from what we have seen, there hasn't been that. There hasn't been that high level of appointment for persons with disability. If the president intends to complete the remaining 3, perhaps this is a chance, I think, the moment that the president needs to show, that the government really want to be inclusive by giving a chance to persons with disability. Oftentimes, when you hear the conversation around persons with disability comes up, it comes from the place of most times people feel like doing this community a favor. It is not. I think we have to approach it from a right-based approach. These are Nigerians, like every one of us, that should enjoy all the inalienable rights that we have in our constitution: the right to freedom of association, the right to freedom of assembly, the right for participation, unhindered participation, so long as they fulfill all the requirements of the law. If you, from the conversation so far, as facilitated by the TAF Africa Foundation, the idea is for persons with disability that are qualified. The underlying word there is qualified, that they should be given the opportunity to participate. There have been a lot of agencies, a lot of organizations, especially civil society organizations like the TAF Foundation, that have been helping to prepare these persons with disability for this leadership position. Perhaps it is time, like I said, that the government should do what is right by that community.
But another question that I would want to put to you, thankfully you are, you've worked with elections or worked on elections for long enough. So in the build-up to the elections, in the entire electoral practice in our democracy, in the spectrum in our democracy, what has been the body language of Nigeria? By Nigeria, let me decrypt to political parties in the political process, in the election process, the attitude of Nigerians generally to persons living with disabilities. What has been the attitude? What has been the inclusiveness generated from these sectors?
I think from where I sit and the observation so far, the approach has always been from the point of doing that community a favor. You hear so much of noise from these stakeholders about how they want to mainstream participation, but when it comes to the participation proper, you don't see that on board. Perhaps because also the environment is not codified in a manner that will also ensure this participation. You rightly you pointed the political parties. If you think about how campaigns are conducted in this country, oftentimes they are conducted in a very hostile environment that to some extent will even put fear in even able-bodied people, not to talk about persons with some form of disability. But I don't think that should also limit the participation. There are different levels of engagement, different levels of participation, if you like, for these persons with disability. You can put them at the forefront. You can put them on posters for political parties. In leadership role, they will deliver. We've seen that in the past, that people have even made attempts. But of course, because of the kind of mindset we have towards this community, we don't push it to fruition. I know even in Abuja here in the FCT, we know some prominent names of persons with disability that have also made attempt to be on the ballot, that have also carried out extensive campaigns around Abuja, but they never even got any form of recognition even from their own community. So you often wonder whether we're paying lip services to this. For civil society organizations, you see all sort of intervention before the election, people even tracking the participation of persons with disability as conducted, as encouraged by other groups like even the election management body, like political parties and the like. But you also begin to wonder, to what extent are these civil society also conscious or deliberate in the engagement of the disability community? But we have seen deliberate efforts also for some observer groups, for instance, to push the ideas of these persons with disability forward, to bring them in as observers. We have seen groups like the Inclusive Friends Association, for instance, that have in the past encouraged the disability community to serve as observers. They can come with their own aid, go around polling stations with, the sort of opportunities that is provided by the IFA for them to meaningfully participate. But what has been the inhibition oftentimes is where you come to even voting on election day. Sometimes the way the polling station or polling units are structured, they are not in a manner that will encourage this participation. Some polling units will have to cross gutters to access them. Some polling units are placed in high up location where persons with disability may not be able to access.
Pardon me for butting in very quickly, if you can do this in about 10 seconds. Do you see this mainstreaming or a lack of it as a major hindrance in inclusive governance for people living with disabilities?
Yeah, I think we still have that challenge, especially the stigmatization that is associated with that. Okay. But I mean, we need to correct that mindset, because sincerely, when you come close to engaging with them, I've interacted with them at different levels, you realize they are very wonderful people to associate with, people with bright ideas, with great minds that, if you take them on board, I am sure, whoever will want to work with them will not regret it, will not regret why they will want to bring them close. All right. It's just to provide that opportunity.
Pardon me, Mr. James. Let me add to this conversation. Jacob Pele, he's since joined us. We were unable to reach Ishaku Damu. But Jacob Pele joins us this morning. He is founder and CEO of TAF Africa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm pretty sure you've been listening to a bit of the discussion we're having, or probably you caught a little bit of it. The challenge is still that of mainstreaming. Do you see that as significant to the challenge, the issue we are having with inclusive governance for people living with disabilities?
Well, thank you, Ayo, and thank you for, despite all the challenges, you guys were able to have me this morning to represent a friend of mine, Ishaku, that would have joined. Yes, I think the issue is when the people who wants to implement mainstreaming of persons with disability, and I am not a very good fan of using the word mainstreaming, but inclusion, because inclusion presents a larger picture. The issue is when people are paying lip service to the issue of inclusion, when people are not, they don't have the political will, when there is non-availability of policies, the right policies and framework to drive the process. So you have a situation where
All right. Well, yeah, we'll come back to it. Hopefully, we'll be able to get that connection better, Mr. Pele. Let me come back to you, Mr. James. So here we are now. Inclusiveness is a challenge that we've been talking about for quite a while. Inclusiveness for young people, we're still struggling with it. I guess we're getting there gradually. Inclusiveness for women, we're getting there gradually. What do you think has been the shortfall, well, the reason for the shortfall in inclusive governance with people living with disabilities?
I think it's this notion sometimes from some political class that they own this space, and so they get to dictate even what happened in this space. Not also knowing that governance should actually be a bottom top and not top to bottom. So like Jake had alluded earlier, the challenge oftentimes is the lip service. I've also mentioned that earlier. You see all of this during campaign. These are all done sometimes to stir up conversation, to get people interested in it, to get votes from voters especially. But when the time comes for the main engagement, you neglect the same community that you had made commitment, you had made promises to engage. I think we need to institutionalize some of these processes. We need to, not also want to go the route of saying mainstream, because to even mention that the issue about inclusivity, it means the challenge still exists, and then we just need to see how we could have that political will to ensure that we overcome those challenges. So what is to be done? I think first, of course, is to go back to the drawing board. I begin to think about our legal processes, the legal instrument, for instance. Maybe if we need to make this a matter of law, to say going forward, for instance, you want to see that a certain position, I don't want people to look at it from the position of tokenism, but then to say, since we have tried every route that we thought should make this possible and it's not happening, maybe we need to make it a matter of the law this time and say, okay, we have to reserve certain percentage for this community, and every strata of the society, the government, civil society, and the likes, must make it a deliberate effort to see that we include them, we give them meaningful participation in governance. And then again, just to buttress the point that it's not just giving them for the sake of giving them, but that they are rightfully qualified to do that. If at the point of appointment we don't find persons from that community that have the requisite experience that is needed for that position, perhaps we may overlook it for that moment until we're also able to groom them to the level that they're able to take up that position. But then again, like I will continue to emphasize that we should continue to provide the avenue, the opportunity for them, not only to participate, but to also be grooming them and making them ready, so that by the time those positions are available for them, they'll be able to take on and be able to deliver as expected.
Well, Mr. James, it also raises another question. I mean, what you just said now just raises this other question. Are there metrics that we can use to measure the success of efforts that can promote inclusivity and diversity in government agencies across board?
Yeah, I think we will start looking at it even from the recent effort to ensure their meaningful participation in the electoral processes. If you recall, last year the President signed into law the new Electoral Act, where we have Section 52, I think, that now mandates INEC to do everything possible to ensure the participation of persons with disability in the electoral processes. I think it's a good start. Before now, that aspect of the law is so loose that INEC may decide to or not to. And so it should begin to track those metrics, like you mentioned, I'll see to what degree, to what level did that happen. We got over 34 or 35 million Nigerians as persons with disabilities. So I think it's first a good step that there are available data, available statistics to show that they exist. Now, I mean, these are statistics that can also be disaggregated by their gender and also the type of disability. I think it's to begin to approach them now by, one, the kind of disability and what should be done to help them in their own, to integrate them meaningfully into the society. And then on the part of the agencies of government to also ensure, earlier I had alluded to the fact that even places of voting, for instance, are still a challenge. Okay. Elections, I mean, we just came out of general election. We have about 3 or more years ahead of us to the 2027 election. If it is to begin to reposition polling unit in a manner that will allow their participation, I think this is the right time to start. Okay. If you think about also how some of our buildings are structured, they don't have even ramps that can support persons with disability. For any meaningful organization, for any meaningful government that wants to encourage that.
Pardon me, I had thought that we already crossed that Rubicon of access facilities for people with disabilities. But let me see if we have Mr. Pele back. Mr. Pele, let's hope that the connection is better now. So we have had this conversation. This is the third in the series, if memory serves me right. So how can we champion this any further? What other efforts can be made to at least compel, not the right word to use at this, but at least to compel attention to inclusivity and diversity, which factors in people with disabilities in government at various levels, federal, state, or local?
I heard you clearly. I think my colleague had enumerated many of the factors that can be used as indices, but I think the issue of data comes to mind. Having empirical data disaggregated by types. I think also, I don't know sometimes if government wants to push us to the point of maybe protests, to the point of taking them to court, to the point of becoming a little bit but there's a deliberate effort by government to sort of discourage us and also frustrate us, and it's becoming alarming. I thought with the experience of the current president that he will by all means look in our direction, but it appears that there's a deliberate effort either by him or by the people around him not to even mind whatever we say or do. And that is appalling and very disturbing, and I pray that that will not be the case going forward. I really don't care who they work with. I know that they are political. They can decide to work with anybody in their camp who is a person with disability. And like I always say that I don't care who gets this job done as long as the job is done. So there is that deliberate effort on the part of this present administration not to give ears to all of our advocacy, not to be mindful of whatever and however we feel. And it's unfortunate because, it's more unfortunate because I know some people that I can call friends who are in this government, the chief of staff. I know the effort he made as a speaker to be inclusive. I know many times, many of his events he supported, and many of them he went out beyond to ensure that it has that color of inclusivity.
Well, Mr.
So,
Pele, let me assume that he's still working on those things, just to ensure that this whole campaign is on. But just this one last question for you. Are there strategies? I mean, Mr. Paul James spoke the other time about maybe there is a need to enact certain laws that will compel ministries, departments, and agencies, even the federal government at the very top level of the president or presidency, to factor in people living with disabilities. What strategies do you think government or government agencies can implement to address this bias and discrimination during the selection process?
Well, the one is they need to keep working with the OPDs that truly understands the issue around inclusivity and that are selfless in terms of service to the community. Number two, there's a need to collaborate and come out with a national policy on inclusion. And when I mean that, it has to be holistic. Inclusion of women, inclusion of youth, inclusion of persons with disability, inclusion of other emerging communities that will be further left behind. So there needs to be a clear-cut, precise, crystal clear national policy on inclusion. Okay. The second thing is the government needs to be honest and deliberate in terms of sourcing for resources. For instance, INEC wanted to do a bit of an inclusion that she said she wanted to do. There was a deliberate, I must be honest to say that, they wanted to do it. But however, they didn't have the resources. So there has to be a designated budget to drive inclusion. There has to be the development partners' participation in the drive for inclusion.
It's a long walk, Mr. Pele. There's no doubt about it. It's a long, walk. And I mean, if I recall very well, what effort you have made over the years, to try to bring us to where we are today. I know that that it's been quite a journey, and we're most certainly making progress. A missed opportunity, Mr. Paul James says it is not. Well, we have to hang this conversation here because we're completely out of time. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Jacob Pele is CEO and founder of TAF Africa. We've also had the pleasure of Mr. Paul James. Paul James, any last words? 10, 15 seconds? Okay, but unfortunately we couldn't quite hear you. Sincere apologies about that. Paul James is Program Manager, Election, YIAGA Africa. Thank you so much for your time this morning. So we're back right after now to talk about another one. We've had a second joint external evaluation in disease control. What does that mean? After now.